you get to win the amazing prizes from Dynasty, as well as this Antarctic ambassador sticker that is not sold anywhere in the world. Yeah? All right. So I'm going to start off just to introduce myself. My name is Rashida Lim. I'm born and raised in Singapore. I'm the chief representative of Albatros Expeditions right here in Southeast Asia. Now, Albatros have been in the polar industry for over 30 years. He owns a couple of different ships, one of which is the Ocean Atlantic, and the other is the Ocean Victory, which I will talk more about later. I have been in Arctic and Antarctica myself personally for over 40 voyages. And I've worked as an expedition staff, an expedition leader. I also organized the Singapore Charter last year. And I was on the ship, and I will also continue to be on the ship for this coming voyages that I'll be presenting later on. Okay, so I'm very excited to be here today to share with you about my experiences. So let's start. So where is the Arctic? You know, we always hear people say, oh, I'm going to the Arctic, but where exactly is the Arctic? So sometimes the most common description is defined as the area surrounding the North Pole. You can see my cursor over here. Yeah. So it consists of many different countries from Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia, US, Canada, Denmark, which is specifically Greenland, and as well as Iceland. Well, the closest to the North Pole and one of the most dense population of polar bears in their natural habitat is right here, is Svalbard, which is what we're going to talk about today. Okay. Now, Svalbard is a group of islands located in the Arctic Ocean, about halfway between Norway and the North Pole. Now, here you will find untouched Arctic wilderness and unique wildlife in a setting that is both rugged and fragile at the same time. Now, Svalbard is an international treaty area administered by the Norwegian government. Therefore, it is both a place of great natural beauty with abundant wildlife, but it's also a good place for international science hub for Arctic research. Now, it makes it the ideal travel destination as you will be able to experience real-life scientists working in New Ålesund, for example. New Ålesund is one of the towns in Svalbard, and you can see how modern-day Scandinavians live in the farthest north Arctic society in the world. And of course, we also hope to meet some whales, polar bears, seals, little auks, as well as walruses. So we'll take a closer look of Svalbard right over here. Now, the shaded area is the area we plan to go. The expedition staff has been working in Svalbard for many decades, so they're very experienced and have a wealth of knowledge about the area and the wildlife. Now, the trip starts out in Longyearbyen, which is right over here. Now, this is where we land at the airport and where we embark on the ship. Now, Longyearbyen has the world's northernmost community with about 2,000 inhabitants living there. It also has supermarkets, shops, restaurants, and in northernmost hospital, bank, playground, etc. And also in New Ålesund, where it's further up here. It is a research center, as I mentioned just now, as well as it has the northernmost post office right there. Now, moving on. So this will be our home for 7 nights while we are in Svalbard. It's a very strong ship. It has an ice-strengthened hull and with a maximum of 200 guests on board. Here you will get to meet some amazing staff and crew and also enjoy amazing food on board the ship. This is the ship that we also took to Antarctica on our very first Singapore charter last year. Now, embarkation. So how do we embark on the ship? You don't have to worry about your luggages. Your luggages will be carried from the pier into the ship by the crew. And then you check in as if you check in to a hotel. So you give in your passport, and then they'll register your room, stuff like that, and you'll get mandatory safety briefings. And announcements will be made on board for any important briefings that is on board the ship. And for Svalbard, we have night sailings. Now, usually on expedition trips, we usually have a couple of sea days. But here, we usually sail through the night, and there's no open ocean sailing. Most of it will be along the coast. So it's coast sailing. However, you'll still be able to feel the ocean, but it's not like the open ocean voyages. Yeah. And once we arrive in Svalbard, so landing and cruising, this is what we plan to do once we arrive at the destinations. Landing means we have time to walk ashore, we have time to step on the land and take a walk, whereas cruising means we get into the Zodiacs, the boats, little boats here, and then we cruise the shorelines. Yeah. And just to introduce you, this is the mudroom. So before we leave the ship, we have to get dressed properly. And we always do that in the mudroom right here. This is the place where you will be very familiar with. We will provide you with waterproof boots and life jackets, but you have to bring your own good winter and waterproof clothing. Now, this is the meeting point for all our activities off the ship. So we go from here, the mudroom, into the Zodiacs. So you keep hearing me say Zodiac, Zodiac. So what are Zodiacs? So these are Zodiacs. Zodiacs are very strong, inflatable motorized boats, and it's a safe way to land and cruise where large vessels cannot go. We also use this mainly to maneuver around shallow waters and to get up close with ice and wildlife. Now, one of the things we get to learn on the ship is the seaman script. Seaman script is basically the handshake that we learn and we use all the time on the ship. It's basically grabbing the wrist so that you have a good grip of each other, and we'll use this a lot. So this is like just one of the examples of what we'll learn on the ship. And as I mentioned, we take Zodiac. So if you can see here, this is the gangway. So you go down a couple of steps, we get in on and off the Zodiacs like this. Yep, and each Zodiac can sit around 10 guests, excluding the expedition staff who will be driving. So as I mentioned, we do both landing and cruising. If you can see in this picture, on the top right, that's me driving the Zodiac up there. And on the bottom left is the landing we have in Svalbard. And as you can see, the expedition staff will usually be carrying rifles in Svalbard as a precaution, because after all, it is still a polar bear country. So what will we be seeing during our landings and cruisings in Svalbard? So this is some pictures to show you a broad section of the things that we have experienced in Svalbard. And we do some hiking over here. And sometimes we even get close to bird cliffs. So up here on the hills, they are all bird cliffs. And we also walk around along the shorelines. It's beautiful scenery. And this is New Ålesund. So as I mentioned just now, New Ålesund is a research center. It has the northernmost post office. So yeah, you can see right here, this is along the main pathway, and there's a museum right there. This is the post office on the left. On the top right, that is the shop. So there's even a souvenir shop. So if you want to buy some shopping souvenirs from the northernmost place, this is where you buy it. And then the bottom is the Chinese research station right there in Svalbard and New Ålesund. And this is what cruising looks like. So sometimes I think I like cruising might be better than landings, because you can get to see wildlife and nature from a different angle. Yeah. And more cruising pictures. As you can see, sometimes you see glaciers, we see previous ones. As you can see, it's bird cliffs over there. There's all birds on the cliffs. And you might get to see the Arctic fox too. Puffins. And this is the Arctic tern. You'll learn more about the Arctic tern when you're on the ship, but this is one of the most amazing birds, beautiful birds. And this is an Arctic tern in action. It's feeding. And sometimes we also choose to do ship cruising, because as you can see, 360 degrees around this kind of environment. It's amazing. And here is one of the fun activities that we get to do on the ship, which is the polar plunge. So you get to jump into the cold waters of the Arctic. And the best part is that this activity is free. So you can do it. I've done it multiple times myself. I jump in like 5-6 times, and yeah, so it's a good experience. I would recommend you to do it. More pictures of people jumping in. And I'm pretty sure some of Dynasty staff also jumped in, so you can ask them about it. Yeah. And this is the expedition staff. So just a short introduction about us. We drive the Zodiacs, we give lectures, we give briefings on the Arctic or Antarctic, and then we are all from different countries. So even some of my co-workers are retired professors. So they have very vast experience. And of course, we also have great hotel crew on board. So from cabin stewards to waiters to chefs to receptionists who will all tend to your needs while we're on the ship. Just an introduction here. This is our chef, Chef Indra. He's Indonesian, so he cooks very good food when we're on board the ship. So you'll be happy, very happy. Yeah. And usually every night, we will have a recap. So usually the expedition leader will recap whatever we have done for the day. And then we will also tell you the plans for the next day. Because as you know, everything in Arctic and Antarctic is dependent on the weather. So the expedition leader will give you briefings every night. But on the very last night, we have the captain join us. So this is our captain over here. And he will join us for a captain's farewell. We'll have a toast to celebrate our unique expedition. Is around here. Now, why do we go here? It's because most of the wildlife is there. And why from Argentina? You might say from many other countries, but that's the shortest route that we can get to the Antarctic Peninsula. Okay. So on this voyage, we will be taking the Ocean Victory. This will be our home. Now, the Ocean Victory is our new build. It's one of 6 sister ships. As you can see in the front right here, it is called an X-bow, so it's a bit different from the other ships that we have seen so far. And the X-bow is very cool. It's different. It's unique. The National Geographic will also have a ship of the same design. And the reason why it's called X-bow is because it cuts through the water, and it also enables stable and smooth sailing. It's good for crossing the Drake Passage, which I will talk about later. Now, its big sister, the ship's big sister, which was already built, it already crossed the Drake Passage over 30 times. And the response was that the Drake sailing was very smooth. So we look forward to getting on the ship to cross the Drake Passage. Now, this is a closer map look at where we're going. So as I mentioned just now, Ushuaia, that's where we embark the ship on. Now from there, we will sail down into the Antarctic Peninsula, which is over here. And then after we're finished with Antarctica, we will sail further up to the right to South Georgia. And then after South Georgia, we will go to the Falkland Islands. And then after some time in Falkland Islands, we will sail back to Ushuaia, where you would take your flight back out. So embarkation and this embarkation is at the same place in Ushuaia. Okay. So same thing for the embarkation. If you were here earlier just now for the Arctic presentation, as I mentioned, everything will be the same as like checking into a hotel. The crew will carry your luggages for you, and then you check in as if you check in into a hotel. And this is one of the famous points on the globe. As I mentioned, we have sea days usually on expedition trips. And here we're going to cross the Drake Passage. So the Drake Passage is a very famous point on the globe, and we sometimes call it Drake Lake or Drake Shake. So if it's a Drake Lake, it means it's calm and smooth like a lake. If it's Drake Shake, then of course it's going to be a bit more rocky, but you don't have to worry because it's not dangerous. And this is why we need a very strong and powerful ship. You will still feel the rock, but it will be very, very safe. And you don't have to worry because personally, I have crossed the Drake Passage 60 times, 60 times. So if I can do it, you guys can do it too. Okay. And this sea days is also time for us to prepare to land in Antarctica because there are special rules and regulations to follow as it is a protected area. Yeah, so for example, we'll have lectures about Ayato, about Antarctica and its wildlife, and we'll also have social activities where you get to meet fellow passengers. Now, once you've done with all the preparations and been in Antarctica, hopefully you'll be a Antarctic ambassador, truly. Okay. Now, as we arrive, what are the first signs that we are arriving in Antarctica? Usually you get to see these huge, beautiful, beautiful icebergs. So once we see that, we know that we've crossed the Drake and we are approaching the seventh continent. So this iceberg right here is a tabular iceberg because you see it's like a table, but there are many, many other kinds of icebergs that we'll get to see and learn about when we're on the ship as well. And same thing in Antarctica, we plan to do both landing and cruising. Now, once we arrive in Antarctica, we are in the realm of nature, which means we move ourselves around at her courtesy. So in order to be flexible, we use zodiacs to maneuver around the ice, rocks, and beaches, as well as get close to nature. And these are the zodiacs again. So the same zodiacs that we use in the Arctic, we use it for the Antarctic too. It's a very safe way to land and cruise in Antarctica. Again, we're places where the large ship cannot go to. And same thing, in Antarctica, we do both landing and cruising. So what do we get to see when we go landing? So in Antarctica, we get to see penguins. So we don't see wildlife such as polar bears. No, we get to see penguins. And these penguin colonies, there's a lot of them. And these penguins are not shy because they're not hunted. So you can get to see many, many of them. And sometimes they even come up pretty close to you. This one, for example, on the left bottom picture, this is a Gen 2 penguin. Whereas the one on the right over here, this is the chin strap penguin. As you can see, there's like a strap across the chin. So it's called a chin strap penguin. Yeah. And sometimes you get to see them making love or carrying rocks to make their nests and stuff like that. It's very interesting. So this is a picture I also took from my phone. As you can see right in the background, the ship is there. And then you can see a couple of zodiacs. And where I'm standing on is where the shore is. So this is the reason why sometimes you see that we need to use the zodiacs, because from the ship to shore, it's pretty shallow and there's usually a lot of brush ice. There's a lot of ice around. So that's why we use the zodiacs. And just a little story. So usually I like to say penguins are very hard to get. They play hard to get, sometimes a little bit like us gulls sometimes. Like, so if you chase after them, they will run away. Whereas if you stay in your spot, the penguin might get curious and they will come up to you on their own. So what happened, this little penguin, we were about to go off and there was no penguins around and I was the last one to go. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go off. And this chin strap penguin just suddenly stopped directly in front of me. And then it was like, okay, what's up? And then, you know, when penguins like to call out to the mates, they will stretch out the neck and then they will like move it around and make some noise. So as I was about to walk off, like move away from the penguin again stretched out his neck, like on the top right-hand corner. And then, you know, was like calling out to me as if I'm a huge penguin. So of course I fell in love with penguins straight away. This is like my favorite penguin. And my boyfriend got jealous. Up to today, he's still jealous and he's still talking about it. Okay. So this is what we get to see when we go cruising. So as you can see right over here, this is a zodiac full of 10 guests. So 10 people plus the driver. And imagine the kind of landscape you get to see. So it's magnificent, glaciers, ice, and stuff like that. It's huge. So imagine right now you're sitting in a boat. There's 10 of you. And this is the kind of landscape you'll get to see in Antarctica. Okay. Sometimes you get to see seals. This is a leopard seal. It's a bit more ferocious. So we usually don't get too close, but they're very, very beautiful. You get to see their skin. It's like a leopard. That's why we call it a leopard seal. And then this one's a Weddell seal, the top right-hand corner. This is a Weddell seal. And then also the crab eater seal. They're very, very pretty. And sometimes when we get lucky, we also get to see whales. So we get to see them sometimes from the zodiacs, from the shore, or even from the ship. And most of the times we get to see like humpback whales, which are pretty common, but we still have to be lucky in order to see them. And then from the ship, we also do ship cruising, as we said, sometimes. And even from the ship, sometimes you might get to see this one, orcas, or you see blue-eyed sharks, and you get to breathe in fresh air on the open deck. Now, as we leave the Antarctic Peninsula, we move into a completely different world and the environment changes. Now, South Georgia is a mountainous island, so the landscape is very, very different from the Antarctic Peninsula. It's a group of islands under the British rule, and it's renowned for being one of the top 3 destinations in the world because of its wildlife and landscape. Now, here is where you get to see hundreds of thousands of king penguins, fur seals, elephant seals, and etc. And it's often referred to as the jewel of the Antarctic travel. Now, in order to get to South Georgia, we have to obtain special permission to land and operate here. And all the staff and crew have to undergo specific South Georgia training and certification tests. So it's not your average tourist destination. There are also time limitations and area restrictions for travelers. So we also have to pay very high fees for each passenger to land and experience this very, very special place. Now, this is Great Viken. This was a Norwegian whaling station, and it's the first land-based station right here in South Georgia. Now, this station, it's a little small, but you see a couple of buildings. There's a church there. There's a museum, a shop, and stuff like that. And this is a couple that I met in South Georgia. So they were living there in Great Britain, and this is the book that was authored by them. And you can see at the background, that's the post office. So if you look at the whole experience, this is South Georgia. If you look at the whole experience, it's very different from the Antarctic Peninsula. There is, for one, there's less ice, and the landscape appears to be more open and accessible. However, in reality, it is very, very rugged. And the waters are very deceptive and difficult to navigate. But we have been there many, many times. So we have the experience to navigate the waters, so you don't have to worry. And as I mentioned, here are the famous inhabitants that we travel all this way for. These are the king penguins. They're very, very beautiful, super beautiful. This is a picture that I took with my phone, and no filter at all. This is, straight up from the phone. And as you can see, more king penguins. And I'm not kidding when I say hundreds and thousands of king penguins you see in the background. It's all king penguins. The bottom right here too. And the top right is a closer look. I love the color of king penguins. It is super cool. And there you go. All in the background, everything is king penguins as well. So I'm really not kidding. It's a lot of king penguins, and that's why we come here. And here's another picture of all the king penguins. And sometimes you get to see elephant seals. So this is an elephant seal. You see all the king penguins there too along the beach. More elephant seals. And this is a baby fur seal. This one is a little fierce, so we don't want to get close to them, but they're very cute, but very fierce too. Okay. Now, we leave the incredible island of South Georgia and we move towards a controversial area in South America. Now, the Falkland Islands has British rule, which is contested by the Argentinian government. It has a very distinct European look when you visit the city. So this is Stanley. You will feel like you're walking around in a British harbor town. Now, they even drive on the correct side of the road. Hence, all of us will have a chance to experience English architecture, snacks, and culture. So it is very different experience here in Falkland Islands than the great nature and wildlife that we would have met earlier on in Antarctic Peninsula and South Georgia. So we all enjoy the fact that we can wander around freely again in the city and take the time to explore this little pocket of English culture. Over here, there's also a supermarket, cafes, bars, and stuff like that. So I like to go to the supermarket because after you've traveled for a long time, you're like, I get my Cadbury, chocolate fingers, chocolate snacks all in the supermarket right here, and you can find them there. Okay. This is the Visitor Information Center. So once you get off from the Zurich, you'll be able to see this. And the post office. And this is the church. When you're walking around, you can also see. And you can see on the right is also from the whalebone, the jaw bone. Yeah. And this is another place in Falkland Islands. It's called the West Point Island. So on West Point Island, where we land, you have to take a bit of a hike, a bit of a walk. And at the end of the walk, this is what you will see. So, you might go up there and you're like, oh, what's there to see? It's just the sea, or, just like maybe there's nothing much. But if you take a closer look, these are the black-browed albatrosses. So they are very beautiful creatures. If you can see the eye up here, it's like, to me, it seems like it's a black eyeshadow. Yeah, so that's why it's called black-browed albatrosses. They're very, very, very pretty. You get to see them along the cliffs, basically. And over here too, as you can see at the back where I'm pointing, that's a rock hopper penguin. So sometimes you can also get to see rock hopper penguins in between the albatrosses as well. Yeah. And on the Ocean Victory, the same thing. This is the mud room. So we'll go from here, we get changed, and then we get into the Zodiacs every time we get off the ship. Boots and life jackets, again, will be provided. And in Antarctica too, we do polar plunge. So during our voyage up north and down south, you get to do the polar plunge. So why not do both? Yeah. Again, it's free. It's a free activity. So got to do it. And for this voyage, we have a bit more sea days. So it means we have more time also for activities on board the ship. So one of the things that we get to do is we get to make our own dumplings. So as you can see here, we make our own dumplings, and then usually the chef will cook them, and then we get to eat them for dinner after that. There's also more activities like here, dancing by me, and then stretching classes, also by yours truly. And then we have rope tying sessions sometimes, and we also have drawing art classes on board the ship. And then also, if there's time and if the captain allows, we'll usually do a bridge watch, a bridge tour. So we can go up to the bridge and see what does the captain's office look like. Okay. All right. So before we go on to the quiz, I would just like to say that to conclude that basically I've been there many, many times. I've been to Antarctica and the Arctic many times. And for me, it's a experience. It's a very, very memorable experience. I travel a lot, and sometimes when you travel a lot, you don't get to really remember where you've been to sometimes, or you don't really remember a place. But both the Arctic and Antarctica are places that I will always remember very clearly, very vividly. And it's a place that I would recommend all of you to go at least once. And every time, for example, I've been there so many times, but every time I go there, it's different. It's different because it's in nature. So the ice is different. The penguins, sometimes they're doing something. You see the way that they live in the most natural habitat. So the weather is different. So every single time is different. It doesn't look the same every single time I go. So that's the beauty of nature. So I love it myself. And like I said, I've crossed the Drake Passage 60 times. So if I can do it, you guys can do it too. So I would encourage all of you to try it and go have this experience. So let's go. Question number 1. Ooh. Which Singapore travel agent organized the very first Singapore charter to Antarctica? I say again, which Singapore travel agent organized the very first Singapore charter to Antarctica? Remember, as Lean said, compile your answers together. Yeah, I will go on to the next question. Where can we find polar bears? Is it the Arctic or the Antarctic? Again, where can we find polar bears, the Arctic or the Antarctic? Please get this right. 3 more questions to go. Okay, so fastest fingers for 3 more questions. So question number 3. What do we use as a means of transport to maneuver around ice and shallow waters for landing and cruising in the Arctic and the Antarctic? What do we use as a means of transport to maneuver around ice and shallow waters for landing and cruising in the Arctic and the Antarctic? Small clue is the small motorized boat, inflatable boat. Okay, make sure your spelling is right. Okay, going on question number 4. South Georgia is home to hundreds of thousands of what penguins? Again, South Georgia is home to hundreds of thousands of what penguins? Okay, last question. Ready? Get your fastest fingers first. Now, which Singaporean holds the record for crossing the Drake Passage the most number of times? Say again, which Singaporean holds the record for crossing the Drake Passage the most number of times? Again, I think it's 60 times. Okay? All right. Back to Lynn.
Okay, so thank you everybody for participating. And we do hope that you have enjoyed this showcase of the Arctic and Antarctica. If you have questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. As mentioned, we do have ready products and itineraries for the Arctic and the Antarctic. So we will be launching them as soon as we are allowed to. And thank you so much for joining us this Saturday afternoon. Have a very good weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.